6-year-old boy asked bikers to walk him to school so he felt safe. What they did next shook everyone. He was only 6. Every step to school felt like walking into a storm. The jeers, the shoves, the fear, it never stopped. Until one morning he did something no one saw coming. He asked a group of bikers for help. What they did next would change an entire town. The sun hadn't fully risen yet when Noah Greene, 6 years old, zipped up his too big backpack and tied his sneakers with trembling hands. His mom, Maya, watched from the doorway, coffee untouched, worry etched into her face. Every morning had become a negotiation. "Noah, I can drive you," she said softly. He shook his head. "It's okay, Mom, it's just 3 blocks," but they both knew it wasn't okay. For the past month, Noah's walk to Elmwood Elementary had been a quiet kind of torment. Older kids from 5th grade, mostly one boy named Ricky Paulson, waited near the old oak tree at the corner of 5th and Alder. They called him names. Shoved his backpack. One time, they tore up his homework and tossed it into the gutter. Teacher said they'd keep an eye out. The principal called it boys learning. Boundaries. But boundaries don't mean much when you're 6 and alone. That morning, as Noah stepped onto the sidewalk, Maya's eyes followed him until he disappeared past the mailbox. She exhaled shakily. Somewhere deep down, she knew something had to change, but she didn't know what. 3 blocks away, Noah's small frame passed under the shadow of that oak tree again. The boys were waiting. Ricky smirked, stepping into his path. "Well, if it isn't Baby Greene," he sneered. "Where's your mommy now?" Noah said nothing, just walked faster. They laughed, chasing him a few steps, yelling things he didn't understand but knew were cruel. When he reached the school gate, tears burned behind his eyes. He didn't cry, not yet, but the fear had started living inside him. Quiet, constant, and heavy. That night, Noah told his mom he wished someone could walk with him. "Someone big," he whispered. "Someone they're scared of." Maya Greene had always been soft-spoken, the kind of woman who apologized when others bumped into her. She worked nights at a diner, saved every tip for Noah's school supplies, and believed the world was mostly good. Until her son stopped smiling. The bruises were small at first. Scraped knees, a red mark on his arm. But then came the nightmares. Noah would wake up crying, whispering that the big boys were coming again. When Maya went to the school, Principal Harris listened with crossed arms and a patient smile. "Mrs. Greene, I understand," he said. "But kids roughhouse. It's normal. We don't want to make a big deal out of small things." "Small things?" Maya's voice cracked. "My son's terrified to walk to school." "We'll talk to the boys," he said dismissively. "They probably don't mean any harm." Noah sat quietly beside her, legs swinging, face pale. As they left the office, Maya realized something brutal. No one was going to help them. Not the teachers. Not the school. Not the other parents who saw and looked away. That evening, while Noah drew dinosaurs at the kitchen table, Maya stood by the window, watching the street lights flicker on. A low rumble of engines echoed from the gas station a block away. She looked toward it absently and saw them, bikers, 6, maybe 7 of them. Leather jackets, heavy boots, their laughter cutting through the quiet. Most people avoided them. But something in Maya's chest stirred. Later that night, Noah said softly, "Mom, what if someone big walked me to school? Like those motorcycle guys?" Maya smiled sadly. "Sweetheart, those men have their own lives." But Noah didn't smile back. Maybe they'd help if they knew. He wasn't being funny. He wasn't imagining heroes in leather jackets. He was asking for safety the only way a 6-year-old could imagine it, by believing someone stronger might finally care. And for the first time, Maya wondered, what if he was right? The next morning, the air felt heavier. Maya drove Noah halfway, but he insisted on walking the last block alone, trying to be brave. She parked by the gas station instead of going straight home, her eyes tracing the men gathered near their bikes. They were members of Iron Legacy, a local motorcycle group known for charity rides, toy drives, and loud engines that rattled every window on Main Street. Their president, Marcus Bear Dalton, stood by a black Harley, coffee in hand, beard streaked with gray. Maya hesitated before stepping closer. Her heart pounded so hard she almost turned back, but then she thought of Noah's tiny shoulders shaking as he whispered, "Someone big." "Excuse me," she said, her voice unsteady. Bear turned, surprised. "Morning, ma'am. You need gas or directions?" Maya shook her head. No. I need help. The men fell quiet. She told them everything. About the boys, the walk, the fear. Her voice broke when she said, he's 6. He shouldn't be afraid to walk 3 blocks. When she finished, there was silence, the kind that feels like the world itself listening. Bear stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What's his name? Noah. And he walks to Elmwood Elementary? Yes. Bear turned to his group. You boys busy tomorrow morning? A ripple of low chuckles went through the group. One biker with a bald head and kind eyes grinned. Guess not, Prez. Maya blinked. Wait, you mean, Bear smiled. If your boy needs someone to walk with him, we'll make sure he gets there safe. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. You'd really do that? Bear shrugged. Ma'am, no kid should be scared to go to school. We ride for respect, not fear. That night, for the first time in weeks, Noah fell asleep smiling. The next day dawned crisp and golden. Maya walked Noah to the front door. But before he could take a single step, the sound of engines filled the street. Then he saw them. 12 motorcycles, chrome gleaming in the morning light, parked in perfect formation outside their apartment. Each rider wore a leather vest with the Iron Legacy patch stitched across the back. Bear stepped off his bike, his massive frame towering over the handlebars. Morning, kiddo. Heard you could use some backup. Noah's mouth dropped open. You came, Bear grinned. Told you we would. The neighbors peeked through curtains. A few even stepped onto their porches. The sight of those men, tattooed, rough-looking, but standing tall beside a tiny boy, was something no one in Elmwood had ever seen. Ready to roll? Bear asked. Noah nodded, his face glowing. He climbed onto the back of Bear's bike, helmet too big for his head, and the group set off, engines rumbling like thunder down Maple Street. When they reached the corner of 5th and Alder, the Bullies were there. Ricky and his friends froze mid-laugh. The entire group of bikers slowed, parking right by the oak tree. Bear leaned down. These the fellas who've been giving you trouble. Noah didn't speak. He just looked at the ground. Bear smiled gently. Don't worry. We'll handle this. He turned his gaze toward the boys. His voice, calm but firm, carried weight. Morning, gentlemen. We're just making sure our little friend here gets to school safe, that's all. Ricky swallowed hard. Well, we weren't going to do anything. I know, Bear said softly. You're going to be fine too. The bikers didn't threaten. They didn't shout. They just stood there, silent, unmovable, protective. By the time they reached the school gates, kids were whispering. Teachers stared. But all Noah saw was sunlight on chrome and the feeling of being untouchable for once. That morning he walked through those doors with his head held high by noon. Word had spread through the entire town. Photos of Noah and the bikers walking into school hit social media. The Iron Legacy Angels, one local headline called them. At first, some people laughed. Others criticized. What kind of example is that? Motorcycle gangs around kids? But something about that image, rough men shielding a child, stuck in everyone's mind. Principal Harris called Maya into his office the next day. Mrs. Greene, he said stiffly, this stunt with the bikers, it's causing quite a disruption. Maya raised an eyebrow. You mean people actually paying attention? He frowned. It's not appropriate. We can't have motorcycles on school property. They stayed on the street, Maya said calmly. They're not hurting anyone. They're making my son feel safe, something you refused to do. Harris shifted uncomfortably. There are procedures, Mrs. Greene. There were, she said. You ignored them. Meanwhile, Noah's classmates started sitting with him at lunch. The same kids who once looked away now whispered, that's the boy the bikers protect. The bullying stopped, almost instantly. But the story didn't end there, because the bikers came back. Not once, but every morning that week. Sometimes 5 of them, sometimes 20. They'd wait at the corner, nod at Noah, and walk beside him all the way to the school gates. And for the first time in Elmwood's history, fear lost. But for Bear and the Iron Legacy, this was more than a good deed. It stirred something deeper, memories of their own lost childhoods, of times they'd been overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. Protecting Noah wasn't charity, it was redemption. And soon that redemption would take the entire town by storm. Every morning that week, the sound of engines became Elmwood's new alarm clock. Mothers peeked through blinds. Fathers waved as they left for work. Kids ran to windows shouting, "They're here!" And always at the center of it all was Noah, his tiny backpack swaying beside a wall of leather and chrome. But behind those dark sunglasses and tattoos, the bikers weren't who people assumed they were. They weren't criminals. Most were veterans, mechanics, or men who'd made mistakes they spent years trying to fix. Bear, the leader, had once been a soldier. 2 tours overseas, 1 bad injury, and a lifetime of ghosts. He never spoke about his past, but when he saw Noah, scared, quiet, trying to be brave, it hit something raw in him. He saw his own son, Eli, the boy he'd lost in a car crash 10 years ago. Eli had been 6, too. One morning after dropping Noah off, Bear sat on his Harley for a long while. The others waited. "You all right, Prez?" one asked. Bear nodded, eyes distant. "Kid's got the same eyes Eli had." Silence followed. No one said another word. That afternoon, Bear stopped by the diner where Maya worked. She wiped her hands on her apron, startled to see him in the doorway. "You don't have to do all this," she said softly. "You've done enough." Bear shook his head. "Nah, we're not done till he can walk alone and smile while doing it." Maya's eyes glistened. "You know, no one ever cared like this before." Bear gave a small smile. "Maybe that's the problem." The truth was, Noah wasn't just being protected. He was healing them too, reminding men who'd lived through pain that courage can still come in tiny shoes and trembling voices. Not everyone liked what was happening. 2 days later, Ricky Paulson's father stormed into the school, red-faced, shouting about grown men intimidating children. He demanded that the principal stop it immediately. Harris agreed, of course. He'd never liked attention that made the school look weak. The next morning, a notice went home. Parents are reminded that non-school affiliated adults are not permitted to escort children onto school grounds. When Bear read it, he exhaled slowly. Guess the suits are nervous. But what no one realized was that the bikers' presence had done more than stop bullying. It had exposed something deeper. Other parents started coming forward. A mother said her daughter was being cornered in the locker room. A father admitted his son had been shoved for weeks. The silence had cracked. That night, Maya found a note taped to her door. "Keep your biker friends away. Nobody likes show-offs, no signature." But she knew who sent it. Fear crept back in. She called Bear, voice shaking. "They're trying to scare us again." Bear's tone hardened. Then they picked the wrong family. He called his crew. That night, a dozen bikes rolled slowly through Elmwood's quiet streets. Not loud, not reckless, just present. A quiet warning that this family wasn't alone anymore. In the darkness, a small face peeked out the window. Noah's, watching the headlights sweep across his wall. He smiled, whispering, "They're here, Mom, my friends are here." And Maya realized those men weren't just protecting her son. They were protecting hope. By the following Monday, the whole town was divided. Some parents praised the bikers. Others called them dangerous. The local news even ran a story titled, "Bikers at the School Gate, Protection or Problem." Principal Harris finally called for a community meeting. The cafeteria was packed. Teachers, parents, police officers, and at the back of the room, the Iron Legacy bikers, arms crossed, silent. Harris stood at the podium. "While we appreciate community concern," he said stiffly, "this behavior is disruptive. We must prioritize the safety and order of our school environment." Maya raised her hand. "Safety?" she said, voice trembling. "My son was being bullied every single day. You did nothing until strangers stepped up." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Officer Ramirez, seated near the front, spoke up. "I've seen these men escort that boy every morning. They've caused no harm. They've done what the system failed to do. Make a child feel safe." Harris's face tightened. "That's not their role." Bear stood then. His deep voice carried across the hall. "We're not here to take anyone's role. We're here because you left a 6-year-old to walk through hell alone. If that's your idea of safety, maybe you need to redefine it." The room went silent. Parents exchanged glances. For the first time, people began to question the school, not the bikers. And as the meeting ended, dozens of parents walked up to Bear, shaking his hand, thanking him. It was the beginning of something larger than Noah, a movement of ordinary people realizing they didn't have to wait for permission to do what was right. 2 weeks passed. Noah laughed again. He played soccer. He walked to school with a skip in his step. The bikers still showed up sometimes, but now they came just to wave, not escort. Their mission was working. Noah wasn't afraid anymore. Then one afternoon, Bear received a small envelope at the gas station. Inside was a handwritten note in a child's uneven scrawl. "Dear Mr. Bear and all my bike friends, thank you for walking me to school. I'm not scared now. I think I can walk by myself tomorrow. You told me big people help little people. When I grow up, I'll help someone too. Love, Noah Greene." Bear read it twice before setting it down, eyes wet. He didn't speak for a long time. The other bikers stood around quietly, unsure what to say. Finally, Bear whispered, "That kid did more for us than we ever did for him." They decided to frame the letter and hang it in their clubhouse, right above the old flag that said honor, loyalty, respect. That evening, Bear rode past Elmwood Elementary. He saw Noah walking home alone, backpack bouncing, humming to himself. At the corner, Noah spotted him and waved. Bear lifted a hand in return, a small gesture, but it carried everything: pride, love, healing. Some stories don't end in words. They end in peace. 2 months later, something remarkable happened. The town organized its annual Community Heroes Parade. Usually it celebrated firefighters, police officers, and school staff. But this year, someone had written a new name on the banner: Iron Legacy Brotherhood. When Bear and his crew rolled down Main Street, the crowd erupted in applause. Kids waved flags. Parents cheered. Even Principal Harris, standing stiffly near the reviewing stand, gave a reluctant nod. At the very front of the line rode Bear, and sitting in front of him, proudly holding the parade flag, was Noah. Maya stood on the curb. Tears streaming down her face, she mouthed, "Thank you." Bear nodded back. No words needed. When the parade ended, the mayor handed Bear a plaque. It read, "For reminding us what it means to protect the smallest among us." Later, as the bikers gathered at the diner, Noah climbed onto a chair and said shyly, "You guys are my heroes." Bear knelt down beside him. "Nah, kid. You're ours." The laughter that followed filled the room, but beneath it was something sacred, a shared truth. Kindness doesn't wear a uniform. Sometimes it rides on 2 wheels and carries a heart that's been broken enough to know what fear feels like. And sometimes, all it takes to heal a town is one small boy asking for help. Days turned into weeks, and Eli's life began to change in quiet, beautiful ways. He no longer rushed through the streets with his head down. He walked, smiling, waving to neighbors who now greeted him by name. The bikers still showed up from time to time, not always in full gear, sometimes just to say hi, check in, or join a school event. Jake once told Sarah, "We wanted him to know something, ma'am. Real strength isn't loud. It's kind." Eli listened from the doorway that day. He didn't say anything, just looked at his small hands, then at Jake's tattooed arm, and realized that heroes didn't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they wore leather and carried warmth instead of weapons. Section 12. The Chain Reaction. The story of the Guardian Riders went viral. Other towns began calling, asking if they could start their own chapters. Hundreds of bikers across the country joined the movement, but the biggest change happened inside the walls of Millstone Elementary. The boys who once mocked Eli started acting different. At first it was confusion, then guilt, and finally courage. One morning, one of the bullies, Ryan, walked up to Eli in the cafeteria. He stood there awkwardly, holding something behind his back. When Eli looked up, Ryan placed a small toy motorcycle on the table and said, "I'm sorry, man. I didn't know you were this brave." Eli smiled, not because the apology fixed everything, but because it proved people can change when shown what courage really looks like. Spring arrived. The town organized an annual Ride for Respect Day, inspired by Eli's story. Bikers from all over lined the main road, engines humming like a promise. Eli, now sitting proudly on the front bike with Jake, wore a tiny leather vest stitched with his name. As they rode past cheering crowds, Sarah watched from the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. She remembered that frightened little boy by the window, and the mother who once didn't know how to help. Now, her son led a movement, and for the first time, she realized sometimes the smallest voices spark the loudest change. Months later, during a school assembly, Eli was asked to speak. The microphone looked bigger than his face, but he stood there confidently and said, "I used to be scared to walk to school, but then people I didn't even know helped me feel brave again. And I learned Brave doesn't mean fighting. Brave means helping. There was silence, then applause, slow, building, unstoppable. In that moment, everyone, parents, students, teachers, saw not just a little boy, but the living proof that kindness multiplies when given freely. Years later, Millstone would still remember that morning, the sound of motorcycles, the sight of a boy walking tall, and the message that echoed across hearts. The Guardian riders still ride, not for fame, not for glory, but for every child who deserves to feel safe, and for every parent praying for one small miracle of courage. On the anniversary of that first walk, Jake and his team placed a plaque near the school gate. It read, "In honor of Eli Parker, the boy who taught us that kindness can roar louder than fear." Eli, now older, smiled when he saw it. He whispered softly, "Fear stops here, and somewhere in the distance." The rumble of engines answered back. If you're watching this, remember sometimes, all it takes is one act of courage to change a life. You don't have to be a biker, a hero, or someone powerful. You just have to care enough to stand beside someone who's scared, because when kindness rides in, fear disappears.